Madam President, staff and faculty, administrators and trustees, parents, family, friends, and other champions and supporters, on this 190th anniversary, I salute the youngest class to graduate from the oldest integrated coeducational liberal arts college in the United States, the Oberlin class of 2023. People in the storytelling business often talk about a classic four-part sequence hidden inside most of humanity's stories. Exposition puts all the stakes on the table. A crisis upends things as they are, which leads to rising action, where the stakes go up as the characters suffer the consequences of ever more excruciating choices. Rising action then builds inexorably to climax, where all the escalating conflicts reach their breaking point. Finally, in the denouement, a new order of things emerges from the climax's wreckage, and the story ends in a changed world. And here you all are, filled with some mixture of relief, excitement, and abject terror as your long exposition comes to an end and your life's rising action is about to commence at last, if you can only make it through 20 more minutes of an almost dead cis white male. The commencement speech is a terrifying genre. By convention, it consists mostly of people who can't remember what it is to be young, telling people who can't imagine what it is to be old, all the bits of wisdom that they themselves ignored at their own commencement centuries ago. But as I was preparing this speech, struck by how this college shaped so many people that I love, and even more amazed to discover how disproportionately it has shaped this country, I did remember something about my own life's exposition. It shocked me to recall that I very nearly went to Oberlin. In high school, I was crazy in love with a woman who played the cello, which I also played. She was a year ahead of me, and she badly wanted to go to the conservatory. So she sent off her audition cassette tape in the mail, if you can imagine that, and heard back sometime later that she had not been admitted. She ended up attending the University of Illinois, and I, who in the words of a famous Oberlin alum, was sleepwalking through my days, not quite hearing what was said to me and not quite seeing where I was going, followed her downstate the next year. But had she played that jig from the third Bach cello suite just a little bit better, I would have followed her here, and had I been accepted, come up for air 4 years later in the class of '79. Instead, I went to U of I as a physics major, which suited my father. He too had gone to Illinois, the first in his family to go to college, courtesy of the GI Bill, which put so many World War II vets through school. My father wanted to be a scientist, but he couldn't hack the math. So he became a school principal and raised me to love education and follow the path that he could not. Everything I now remember learning in college, I can fit on a single sheet of paper. One side. This speech takes 6. There's something really wrong with that. But my first semester at Illinois was filled with Gibbs free energy and Taylor's theorem and sp3 orbital hybridization. My girlfriend and I lived in the same dorm, working hard, but often wondering why. As the country tore itself apart and the doomsday clock kept by the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists advanced from 9 minutes before midnight to 7, its lowest setting since the Cuban Missile Crisis. I remember sitting in a physical chemistry lecture with hundreds of other students, listening to the professor describe what aerosols and refrigerants were doing to the ozone hole and thinking, forget the Russians and the bomb. We have completely hosed ourselves. Only we didn't say hosed back then. It was in that weird mix of daily discovery, intellectual awakening, and steady dread that I took a course in how to read fiction. The professor was as wise a human being as I'd ever met, and he spoke in sentences so ingenious that I used to fall asleep at night trying to reproduce them. It blindsided me one day when reading for that class, I came to the end of a story in a famous collection by an odd Irishman who ran one of the wildest experiments in the history of literature, and found myself in tears. I could not stop crying, and I couldn't understand why. The story was about a man who suddenly realizes that he does not know his own wife, that he has failed to understand his own privileges, that he's sleepwalking through his days, a stranger to himself in his own life. The story ends with the snow falling, softly falling on this character who I loved but didn't know from Adam. And as I sat there crying over nothing and nobody, it astonished me to realize that I wasn't going to become a scientist after all. I hid the news from my father for as long as I could. My girlfriend went on to do graduate work at Oxford. We carried on our love affair via aerograms. I can explain these afterwards to anyone who's interested. That took 10 days to travel back and forth across the Atlantic. When my father found out that I wanted to study literature, he took the news hard, but he made no objections. Early in my final year of school, he was diagnosed with colon cancer, and before I graduated, he was dead. If your parent or parents are here with you today and they want to take lots of pictures of you in your robes, please don't roll your eyes. That same year, I broke up with the woman who had led me to Illinois via a series of aerograms, each taking 2 weeks to cross the ocean. Devastated, I did what any lost boy my age would do to get through the pain. I looked up her best friend. This new love, a flutist, was going to a conservatory in Boston. And when I graduated, she invited me to come out and be with her. I could not imagine a more exciting graduation adventure. That hard winter, I pared all my possessions down to one suitcase and a guitar, which left me feeling like a Simon and Garfunkel song. They were a singing duo. I put my life savings of $1,600 into a cashier's note. For liquidity, I bought $400 worth of traveler's checks, another technology that will be totally inexplicable to you, but one that we were told never to leave home without. I got on a Greyhound bus, which took 55 hours to get from Urbana to Boston. Arriving in Boston in the middle of a brutal New England snowstorm, I figured out the public trans system and made my way to my new girlfriend's apartment in Jamaica Plain. She met me at the door to explain that things had changed in the 2.5 days that I had spent on the bus. She had gotten involved with a trumpet player. She said that, of course, I was welcome to sleep on her couch when I got my feet on the ground, until I got my feet on the ground. I remember my first thought was, not a trumpet player. Please, God, not a trumpet player. Pride prevented me from accepting the couch. I deposited my cashier's check in a Boston bank, but couldn't touch the funds for 2 weeks until they cleared. Thanks to my traveler's checks, don't leave home without them, I soon found a room in a boarding house in Somerville that was the love child of an H.P. Lovecraft story and a David Lynch film. It occurred to me belatedly that I was in trouble. I was in a strange city under 2 feet of snow, with no job, no contacts, no ready money, and a degree in English literature. And I didn't even know where I could go to get a resume printed up. In a matter of days, I had gone from insane self-confidence to wild despair. Then I succumbed to the worst stomach flu of my life, one so bad I couldn't even keep down a glass of water. I lay in my sinister rooming house one evening as my thoughts circled down to a very dark place. My life had jumped the track. I didn't see how I could possibly get it back on course. I didn't want what was happening, and I couldn't reverse it. What had I been thinking? My father was right. I had thrown away my education and my future. Oblivion began to seem like such a simple cure-all. My thoughts began to spiral away from me. I knew I had to get out of the house or risk real craziness. I started to walk, and I walked for a long time, through Cambridge and down to the Mass Ave bridge over the Charles. I stood on the bridge and looked out over the river to Boston. The city was blazing against the winter sky. How many of those 700,000 people were living lives that had jumped the tracks? How many had gotten lost in the tens of thousands of years that people had been living along the Quinobaquin? How many were lost and worse right now? How many were being drowned by a culture that would always destroy its marginalized while letting people like me float? How many were sleeping in the snow? How many were crippled by racism, suffering from injustice, or nursing runaway tumors, facing real disasters that made mine look laughable? Out there on the Mass Ave bridge, the disastrous turn of my life began to unfold into another thing. It had turned clarifying. It led me into a whole new place, a city filled with 1 million catastrophic stories that had a hidden tie to mine. It dawned on me in that moment that I might try to do justice to some of them through words. And then what happened? Then I turned around and went back to my room in the David Lynch Hilton. The dungeon now looked like the setting for a story. The next day, I looked for a place where I could typeset a resume, a search filled with all kinds of comic twists. I got a job that still wasn't my job, in an apartment that still wasn't my apartment, but both were rich with material. Then came some rising action, and some more rising action, more jobs and houses, and lots of mineable stories, eventually leading to a climax or two, until finally, here I am getting my degree from Oberlin at last, as part of the illustrious class of 2023. In case you're wondering about the denouement, I made friends with my first girlfriend again later in life. She has even showed me around Oxford and London. I made friends with my second girlfriend too, after some decades. In fact, I've recently worked with her on various performance projects. She apologized for the trumpet player, who is, alas, lost to history. I became good friends with my college lit professor, the one who taught me to read, and I sat vigil by his bedside for weeks while he died of lung cancer. He told me he thought any reasonable father would have liked my first book. I tell you all this by way of saying that you have no idea in creation what is about to happen to you. It won't be what you want. It may feel like a catastrophe. And yet, it may also be the most clarifying thing if you can step back and read it as part of a story that is much more than yours. Learning to read your life as an unfolding story turns the whole logic of time inside out. In English, we say that the future lies open in front of us, while the unchanging past is behind. But a life led as a story obeys an idea of time more like that in Vietnamese or Aymara, an Andean language, where the past is in front of us, always there to see and reinterpret while we walk backwards into the invisible future. Peter Brooks nails this in his book, Reading for the Plot. We read, he says, in anticipation of retrospection. When we're on page 16, early in the exposition, we know that the ending is out there on page 365, already written. The future of our lives, like the future of a book, is oddly fixed precisely because we can't know it. It's the visible past that keeps changing. Every time we turn another page, these last 4 years at Oberlin will have become a million different things to you by the time you're my age. Now, all my crises were cakewalks compared to yours. The doomsday clock of 2023 sits at 90 seconds, the lowest it has ever been. Our country is tearing itself apart worse than it did in the age of aerograms. Rampant racism is increasingly overt. The globe's climate system has broken down. A third of the world's species are vanishing. All that and ChatGPT just stole your job. The world, as you know it, is ending. But every ending is also a commencement. And there is so much work to do to rehabilitate this place. Endless work that no one will do if you don't. It isn't the work of partisan righteousness. It's the work of empathy and reconnection and rereading. And the work begins, as always, with learning to see all your private disasters as forces in a story so much larger and more compelling than you know. Consider that what feels like this moment's raging fever may only be morning sickness, for today is pregnant with a tomorrow whose children are just now being delivered. So on that single sheet of paper of all the things you'll remember from college when you're old, scribble this into the margin. They're the words of a wild poet whose sexual orientation could have landed him in prison, a man whose world was torn apart by technologies he never understood, and who lived to see his countrymen slaughter one another by the hundreds of thousands over who gets to be a human being. In the middle of that slaughter, he wrote, "Over the carnage rose prophetic a voice, be not disheartened. Affection shall solve the problems of freedom yet. Those who love each other shall become invincible." I read those words when I was young and lost in my own exposition, and they have come to mean so many new things with each passing year. Graduates, I stand here looking out on you, my changing past, while you are backing up into your still hidden future. Oberlin class of 2023, it's time to become invincible.